For years, the world of R&B has revolved around a singular, enigmatic figure, D'Angelo. Known for his soulful sound, intense privacy, and the long, silent stretches between his albums, he built a career defined as much by what we didn't know about him as what we did. Fans have always wondered what truly goes on behind the curtain of his life, what shaped his struggles, his heartbreaks, and his brilliance. Tonight, that silence ends. A voice has finally stepped into the spotlight, and it's coming from someone who knows D'Angelo better than anyone else ever could. Her name is Imani Archer. At 27, D'Angelo's daughter, the one the world barely knew existed, is speaking out. And what she's revealing about her father's hidden life, his struggles, and his legacy has fans and the music industry stunned. This isn't just another celebrity story. It's a revelation that could change everything you thought you knew about D'Angelo, his complicated relationship with fame, and the very real emotional cost of his genius. But wait until you hear the part about the unreleased music and the legal battles that the industry and his management never wanted to come out. For decades, D'Angelo, born Michael Archer, has been one of music's most mysterious figures. Following the monumental success of his album Voodoo in 2000, he virtually vanished from the public eye. His eventual return was celebrated, but his life remained shrouded in a self-imposed secrecy that only fueled his legend. The question always was, why the silence? We all knew about the arrests, the addiction struggles he later admitted to, and the relentless pressure of being called the savior of neo-soul. But there was a deeper, more personal silence that the public never knew about. A silence within his own family. That silence is now being broken by his daughter, Imani Archer. For years, Imani's existence was barely discussed publicly. She grew up in the background of her father's fame, watching from the shadows as the world praised his music, but never truly understood the man behind it. Now, as she steps forward to speak her truth, people are realizing that her story might hold the key to understanding D'Angelo's complex, often tragic legacy. Imani has chosen to speak out in a series of exclusive interviews and a detailed statement released through her legal team. Sources close to her say this was not an impulsive move, but the result of years of quiet deliberation, and perhaps the final straw in a deteriorating family situation. Who is Imani Archer? She's not a celebrity, nor an aspiring musician. She's a woman who spent her formative years navigating a life split between the world of a multi-platinum star and the quiet reality of her mother's home, far from the spotlight. Imani has spent her life carving out her own identity in a world that only knows her father's name. According to her statements, she was raised primarily by her mother, D'Angelo's partner during his early rise to fame. While D'Angelo was present in her life, Imani describes their relationship as emotionally distant and intermittently active. In her own words, the hardest part wasn't the long stretches of time between seeing him. The hardest part was that the man who showed up wasn't the man on the album cover. He was a man consumed by the music, by the pressure, and ultimately by the darkness that fame brought. I felt like a side note in the main event of his life. Sources close to the family confirm that D'Angelo's periods of withdrawal from the industry often meant withdrawal from family life. One insider revealed he would disappear, not just from the recording studio, but from everything. He was a legend to the world, but to her, he was just absent. The pressure on him was immense, and he handled it by shutting down. Unfortunately, that meant shutting them out too. Imani's statements reveal a profound sense of isolation. She claims that while her father provided financially, emotional support was non-existent. This, she says, is the core reason she's speaking now, not to tear down her father, but to illuminate the real cost of genius and the devastating reality of fame. Imani's most stunning revelations center on what she calls the architecture of his silence. She argues that D'Angelo's long disappearances were not solely due to artistic struggle, but were actively encouraged and even monetized by his management and record label. According to her claims, the mystique was a carefully curated product. Imani alleges that during a period of serious personal crisis and creative block in the mid-2000s, her father wanted to be open about his struggles, to publicly seek help and explain his absence to his fans. However, his team reportedly advised against it. A source with direct knowledge of the management team at the time confirms the strategy. The label loved the silence. It created buzz. It made his eventual return a massive event. They told him being a recluse was better for the brand than being broken. They believed the myth of the tortured artist was more valuable than the truth of a man struggling with his mental health. Imani claims this. Enforced silence severely damaged her father. He was constantly fighting to be a human being, and everyone around him was telling him to be a myth. That's a war you can't win. It's a war that ended up costing him his peace, and ultimately, our relationship, she said. The most concrete and explosive part of Imani Archer's revelations is a legal and financial bombshell that could shake the music industry. Imani claims she has been quietly engaging in legal action for the last 3 years, fighting for what she believes is her rightful stake in her father's creative and financial legacy. Specifically, she alleges that a significant portion of the royalties from his most iconic work, including Voodoo, were structured to minimize his long-term financial gain and limit her inheritance rights. Furthermore, she claims to possess a substantial amount of unreleased D'Angelo music, hundreds of demos, unfinished tracks, and complete songs that her father reportedly kept from his label for years. Imani says her father did this as an act of resistance. He felt that if he didn't give them the music, they couldn't control him. He had his own vault. He wanted this music released on his terms, or maybe not at all. But he wanted me to have control over it, she revealed. If this unreleased material exists and is authenticated, it could be worth tens of millions of dollars and would instantly become one of the most significant musical discoveries in modern R&B history. A spokesperson for D'Angelo's current management released a short statement. We are aware of the claims made by Ms. Archer. Matters of inheritance and catalog ownership are private, complex legal issues. We are working with Mr. Archer's counsel to review all historical documentation and ensure all parties' rights are respected. Mr. Archer continues to focus on his music. The statement, though brief, confirms that this is not just a family disagreement. It is a full-scale legal battle. Imani Archer's decision to speak out, she insists, is not about seeking fame. It's about control and truth. Her ultimate goal is twofold: to reclaim her family history and to protect her father's legacy. She wants the world to see the fragile, struggling man behind the microphone, to break the myth that she believes was killing him. And by gaining control over the unreleased music, she hopes to ensure that her father's creative work is treated with respect, not as a commercial product to be exploited. Her story exposes how the machinery of the music industry consumes its greatest talents. It's a painful reminder that while fans get the art, the artist's family often inherits the pain left behind. Imani's final, most emotional statement cuts to the heart of her pain. The world got his music. I just wanted my dad. And every time he made a sacrifice for his art, the family paid the price. I'm telling this story so the world knows the truth. The genius was real, but so was the heartbreak. Imani Archer's emergence has sparked a wider discussion about how record labels often manipulate the narratives of their artists. Music historians are now drawing parallels between D'Angelo's experience and that of other legendary musicians who faced similar exploitation behind closed doors. The so-called mystique marketing that labels rely on has become a double-edged sword, profitable for corporations but devastating for the artists trapped inside it. Industry insiders are whispering that Imani's legal challenge could set a precedent. If she can prove that contracts were structured to limit her father's long-term ownership or inheritance rights, it might open the door for the families of other late or retired musicians to re-examine their agreements. This could mean millions in lost royalties suddenly coming back into question, a nightmare scenario for major labels that depend on legacy catalogs. Meanwhile, D'Angelo's loyal fan base has erupted into debate online. Some fans argue that Imani is brave for bringing transparency to a legacy built on secrecy. Others, however, accuse her of exposing private family matters for personal gain. The controversy has reignited discussions about the public's entitlement to know the truth versus an artist's right to privacy even after their career slows down. Legal experts following the case have noted that Imani's statements indicate more than emotional frustration. They hint at concrete proof. Documents she claims to possess, including royalty statements and unpublished correspondence between D'Angelo and his management, could form the backbone of her legal battle. If verified, these records might show how creative control and revenue were systematically stripped from the artist over time. Behind the scenes, lawyers representing major music publishing houses are reportedly preparing for potential fallout. A verified claim from Imani could prompt government regulators to scrutinize industry contracts, especially those designed during the early 2000s digital transition when streaming and digital rights were poorly defined, and many artists unknowingly signed away their future profits. Interestingly, several of D'Angelo's former collaborators have started to speak indirectly through social media. A few have hinted that they witnessed the pressure and isolation he faced firsthand. One producer, without naming names, wrote, "Sometimes the biggest price of talent is silence. Some people disappear because it's safer than being owned." The cryptic message sent fans into speculation that others in the industry might back Imani's claims publicly in the near future. The music industry has always thrived on myth-making, but this time the myth itself has become evidence. D'Angelo's long absences were often celebrated as artistic retreats, moments of introspection before creative rebirth. Now, if Imani's version holds true, those absences were actually cries for help, misinterpreted and commercialized by those profiting from his legend. Psychologists and sociologists are also weighing in, analyzing how fame, isolation, and creative pressure affect second-generation celebrity children. Growing up in a world that worships your parent but ignores their pain creates an emotional paradox. Imani's decision to confront that paradox publicly may inspire other children of reclusive or troubled artists to tell their own stories instead of protecting myths that harmed them. Reports from individuals close to Imani suggest she is preparing a full-length documentary and book deal, outlining her experience. Early negotiations with streaming platforms are already rumored. Insiders claim the project will not only focus on her father's life, but also on systemic industry abuse, intellectual property exploitation, and how fame can fracture families in irreversible ways. Former associates of D'Angelo's management team are now being questioned by reporters. Some deny any wrongdoing, while others admit that creative control often came second to commercial planning. One anonymous insider told a journalist, "There's always a machine behind the art. The more tortured the image, the better it sells." And D'Angelo's story was gold. If Imani's claims about unreleased music are real, experts say she could become the legal custodian of one of the most valuable private music vaults in contemporary R&B history. Several streaming executives have already speculated that, once authenticated, the material could generate tens of millions through exclusive releases, anniversary editions, and documentaries. The stakes, both emotionally and financially, could not be higher. However, some of D'Angelo's close friends have urged caution. They say Imani may not fully understand the complexities of her father's creative process and that releasing music he deliberately withheld could betray his artistic wishes. These voices argue that some artists need silence to protect their work from being diluted by corporate interests, even if that silence costs them relationships. Cultural analysts have also highlighted the racial undertones of D'Angelo's situation. Black artists, they argue, have historically been forced to embody certain stereotypes, either the tortured genius or the untouchable icon, both of which strip them of humanity. Imani's testimony challenges that system by exposing the personal pain behind those profitable labels. There's also speculation about how D'Angelo himself will respond. So far, he has remained silent, which some interpret as confirmation that there's truth in his daughter's words. Others believe he's simply staying out of the spotlight to protect his mental well-being. Either way, his next public statement, if it ever comes, will shape how history remembers both him and his daughter's fight for control. Within days of Imani's revelations, the media storm reached a boiling point. Major outlets from Rolling Stone to The Guardian ran front-page features dissecting every detail of her claims. Music journalists who once praised D'Angelo's privacy now questioned whether that very silence was a symptom of something darker, a calculated narrative engineered by corporate greed. The debate shifted from curiosity to outrage, with fans demanding accountability from the record label and management figures who had once celebrated D'Angelo's mystique. As a marketing tool, social media exploded with hashtags like "Justice for D'Angelo" and "Let the Music Speak," as fans urged for the release of the unreleased vault Imani mentioned. Some posted old interviews where D'Angelo appeared uncomfortable discussing fame, using them as evidence that he was indeed being silenced. The story was no longer about one man. It became a cultural reckoning on how industries profit from pain. Influencers, musicians, and mental health advocates began using Imani's statements to highlight the exploitation of Black creatives who are pushed into myth rather than supported as people. Then came the shock. A leaked 30-second clip allegedly from D'Angelo's unreleased vault began circulating online. The track, raw and unfinished, carried his signature soulful tone but was lyrically darker, referencing betrayal, control, and loss. Within hours, millions had listened. Fans described it as haunting, while analysts noted that the lyrical content aligned with Imani's claims about her father's inner battles. The leak, whether intentional or not, ignited chaos. The label scrambled to issue takedown notices, but the internet had already preserved it. Imani's legal team released a statement immediately after the leak, clarifying that she had not authorized it. "Ms. Archer has no involvement in the unauthorized release of any material," it read. "She remains committed to resolving matters through the proper legal channels." But sources close to the case suggested the leak might have come from a former studio engineer sympathetic to her cause, frustrated by the label's attempts to silence her narrative. As the investigation into the leak intensified, several musicians who had collaborated with D'Angelo began voicing their support for Imani. A few even confirmed the existence of the vault and the artist's fear of his label exploiting it after his death. Grammy-winning producer Questlove posted, "I saw what that pressure did to him. I hope the truth finally sets him free." This single post shifted public perception dramatically, with many now viewing Imani not as an antagonist, but as the guardian of her father's truth. Meanwhile, the record label's reputation started crumbling. Internal documents surfaced online, possibly leaked by a whistleblower, showing how the company had profited from deliberate media scarcity, timing D'Angelo's public appearances and interviews to inflate value around his brand. The revelations painted a disturbing picture of an industry willing to sacrifice human stability for profit. Share prices for the parent company dipped, and lawsuits from other artists quickly followed, citing similar treatment. Amid this storm, D'Angelo himself was finally spotted in public for the first time in years. He appeared frail but calm, photographed leaving a legal office in New York. When asked about Imani's statements, he simply said, "She's telling her truth." It was a brief response, but it spoke volumes. That one line suggested both acknowledgement and distance, as if he understood her pain, but wasn't ready to relive the wounds himself. Experts believe this single sentence may have been strategic. By neither denying nor confirming the details, D'Angelo avoided legal complications while signaling empathy toward his daughter. But the statement also hinted at a man caught between loyalty to the system that built his career and the family now challenging it. Public sympathy swung heavily in his favor again, transforming the situation from scandal to tragedy. One undeniable fact is that this story has shattered the image of D'Angelo as merely an elusive artist. It's now clear that behind the genius was a man trapped between the music he loved and the machine that controlled it. Whether Imani's campaign ends in legal victory or public backlash, it has already redefined the conversation around artistic freedom, family inheritance, and the unseen human toll of stardom. And as the dust begins to settle, one truth remains. Silence may have once protected D'Angelo's mystique, but now it's his daughter's voice that could protect his legacy. The coming months will bring legal filings, media attention, and speculation across the music world. As Imani Archer prepares to challenge a legacy built on silence, one thing is certain. The narrative of D'Angelo's life, and perhaps his music catalog, is about to be completely and permanently rewritten. Stay with us as this story develops. What do you think D'Angelo's unreleased music sounds like? And will Imani Archer succeed in changing her father's legacy? Let us know your thoughts below.